Hello, my darlings. Okay, I figured out a very simple way of doing your enlargement of your photo using the grid system. It's going to be much easier than the way we were doing it before. So what we're going to do is take your photograph, that's me in all my glory, and we're going to trim down this image until it's 8 by 10 inches. So it's 8 inches wide and 10 inches high, okay? So what we have to do first is measure. So you have to look at your picture and see where there's extra room to remove some of your design. So I need to make this 10, and I have a lot of empty space near the top. So I'm gonna measure 10 inches from the bottom corner, making sure that I'm starting at 0. So I'm gonna measure 10 inches, and I'm gonna take I'm gonna use an H pencil, H or B, it doesn't matter. And I'm gonna make a mark on this side where 10 inches is, and you have to be pretty precise about this. And then again, I'm gonna mark 10 inches on this side, so I've gotta put the 10 at the bottom of the page, line it up completely with the side, make sure I'm lined up before I make a mark, line it up like 3 times, and then make your mark. So there's my cut point. So now I'm gonna draw a line across, and you can cut this with scissors or you can cut it with an X-Acto blade if you're allowed to use those and everything's cool in your family with that. So now I'm going to figure out, I want this to be 8 inches instead of 8.5. So I'm looking at my picture. I'm gonna remove a 1/4 inch from each side. So I'm lining up right on the line that I just made, and I'm gonna mark, because I'm taking 1/2 inch off of each side, so it's no longer 8.5, it becomes 8. So I'm gonna take a 1/4 inch off this side, and then a 1/4 inch off this side, and then I'm gonna make the same marks at the bottom. So I'm gonna line it up, make sure I'm straight and everything's lined up, and the paper is right up against the ruler with every measurement. Gonna take a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. And then again, I'm gonna draw my lines. And I wanna make sure I'm really well lined up, because this is gonna make a difference in how your image turns out when you're ready to do your drawing. So I'm marking it. I only have to, because I chose to take everything off the top, I don't have to do both sides, both the top and the bottom, because I took it only, I had lots of extra room on the top. If you have lots of extra room on the bottom, then you can remove it all from the bottom, or you could take you could take an inch off the top and an inch off, whichever, in order to get the size, which is, we want it to be 8 by 10. Okay, now I'm gonna check that I've done my math right. So I want this to be 8 by 10. So there's 10 that way, and there's 8 this way. Okay, yay, I did it right, woo. Okay, so now I'm gonna trim it. Now I'm gonna use an X-Acto blade. You guys can use one if you already know how. Never cut right on a table, because you're gonna get whoever's table it is not too happy with you. So the way you use this kind of X-Acto box cutter is I move it up just a little bit. I hold this top piece here and slide the bottom piece down, and now it's locked. And then I put my thumb right over the lock, right into the hole that's formed by locking it. I line up my ruler with both sides of the line, and then I do a single swipe down, keeping my tool up against the ruler the entire way. So I'm gonna do that on all sides. So I'm cutting off the excess paper so I have it perfectly lined up. Now, we're gonna divide this paper into 1-inch squares, because 1-inch squares is really, really easy to figure out, and it doesn't hurt my brain. So now what we're gonna do, so I've cut off my edges. Now what I'm gonna do is the exact same way I just marked it, I'm gonna mark it again, but I'm gonna mark off every inch. So again, I'm gonna line this up with the bottom. Once I've lined it up, I don't wanna let it move. So you can tape it down, and just take some tape and tape it down so it doesn't start wiggling around on you. And then I'm gonna line it up, and I'm gonna mark each inch. And I wanna mark it right on the inch, so make sure your pencil is sharpened and that you're being accurate. So I'm marking every inch and putting one mark. Then I'm gonna do the same thing on the top. Every inch, I'm gonna make one mark. So I'm uncovering it so I can reach every inch. So I just move my tape a little so I can reach every inch. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the top. Every inch, I'm gonna make a mark. So mark, mark, mark. So I'm gonna continue that all the way. You couldn't see here. So I'm doing each mark. I'm gonna put a mark, mark, mark. Now on your photograph, your marks can be a little bit darker and more obvious. When you go to put the marks on your big paper where you transfer to, you want your lines to be super, super light. And then I connect the dots. So I'm gonna connect the dots going in this direction, and I'm gonna go make sure I'm lined up. It's super important that I'm lined up with both lines. Then I'm gonna go from the sides. So I'm gonna take my paper, make it easier for me. So I'm gonna take the whole thing and turn it. Now I'm on other paper just because I don't want to cut my table when I was cutting. It also makes it easier to hold it down. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the same thing this way. I'm gonna mark every inch, and I wanna make sure I'm lined up. So I'm gonna mark again every inch this way, and then I'm gonna mark every inch this way. Make sure that you're lined up with the 0 on one end and the 10 on the other end, and I'm gonna mark every inch again. I'm gonna go all the way down the line marking, and then I'm gonna draw my lines going this way. So now I'm gonna have a whole picture of 1 inch squares. Okay, so I would do that across the entire thing. Now, here's my actual picture, and I did some but not all of it. So I'm gonna finish drawing all my grid lines till this entire picture is very lightly covered in grid lines. Now, that done, now I need to do the same thing on a large piece of paper. Now I've got the paper here. We're not gonna use the paper in your book. I'm gonna provide a large piece of, an 18 by 24 inch piece of paper. If you have 18 by 20 inch pad at home, you don't have to come and get a piece. If you don't have one at home, you need to come and get a piece of paper from me, which I've already pre-cut for you. So now what we're gonna do is, we're gonna enlarge it by 1.5. So basically what I did was I took 8 and I multiplied it by 1.5, and that equals 12. Then I took 10 and I multiplied it by 1.5, and that equals 15. So what I'm doing now is I'm enlarging the picture by 1.5. So now we're gonna have to make our grid 12 inches. So 12 inches by 15 inches. 12 by 15 is our goal, okay? So what we have to do now is, on our big piece of paper, you're gonna take your triangle, and you're gonna start by making a line super, super light. And you can do it anywhere. You just need to line up your edges. You can put your edges anywhere. I did mine so that the bottom is about 1 inch from the bottom. That's how I did mine. It's good if you level this with the bottom of the paper. So the best thing's gonna be to do is gonna be this. Start by lining up your ruler at the bottom of your paper. So you're gonna line it up at the bottom of your paper. So you got a nice vertical 90-degree angle. Then you're gonna take your pencil, you can do the outside rim with a B, and you're just gonna draw a line. Then you're gonna measure 12 inches across the bottom of your paper. Now, you could start by lining up the ruler, the 12-inch, so your ruler is completely on the paper. Line it up so it is a perfectly straight line, starting with the 12. And make sure you can see this, you guys. So you want to line this up with the paper. Let me put it a little bit closer to you so you can see what I'm doing. Now, if you are totally confused by this, you can call me. You have an entire week to do this before we have class again. Okay, here we go. So here is the line I just drew. Now I'm gonna put my 12 lined up here, and then I'm gonna line up the bottom of the ruler with the bottom of the paper, because you wanna always have these nice sharp 90-degree angles. Now I'm gonna draw from 0 to 12 in a nice straight line, okay? Now, my next line is going to be, I'm going to line up again with the bottom of my paper, and I'm going to have this edge line up with the 12. So my mark where 12 inches was, because remember we're doing 12 by 15. Now I'm going to draw a line right on that mark. And by moving my paper, I went over the crack, so I'm going to have to move it back again. So now I have my bottom angle. Now, in order to get 15, when our ruler is only 12 inches, I'm going to line up my ruler with the line I just drew. Line it up really perfectly. And I'm going to line it up down here because I went over the crack, so I need to fix it a little bit. So let's see. I'm just going to redraw that line so it's nice and straight. So there's my line. Now I'm going to line up with this line that I just drew. And I'm going to go up. So let's see. First I have to measure 3 inches from the bottom because we need it to be 15 in the end. So I'm going to mark where 3 inches is on the outside of the box. And now I'm going to start there with my 12 because I need it to be 15 inches in the end. I'm lining it up. Now I'm going to go up to the 0 and continue my line. Now, to go across, I do the same thing. I'm going to line up so I have my cross line being nice and 90 degrees from the first line. And I'm going to go across, and then I just have to finish the connection. So I'm going to go the rest of the way just by lining up my ruler with the edge. And just go the rest of the way to the first line. And then I need to connect this line to the line I just drew. So I line it up again. And there's my box. Now, these squares need to be 1.5 inches. It's super important that you double check your measurements before you start marking them. So I'm going to put the marks on the outside of my box. So I'm going to go 1.5 on the outside of my box. 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3. 3 plus 1.5 is 4. 4.5, sorry. 4.5 plus 1.5 is 6. 6 plus 1.5 is 7.5. 7.5 plus 1.5 is 9. 9.5 plus 1.5 is 10.5. And then my last mark is on the 12 mark. And then I do the same thing on the bottom. So I'm going to mark 1.5. Remember, on the outside of the box, I'm going to mark 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5. Okay? So there's my marks going that way. And then I'm going to connect the dots. Now, if you have a longer ruler at home, you can use a longer ruler to do this. If you don't have a longer ruler, you're just going to line up your triangle with each mark go back a little bit from the edge so the thickness of your pencil is included. Now that you're ready to work inside of your box, you need to switch to your 4H. Make sure it's super sharp, and this is the 4H. Now what I have to do is hold this nice and steady, make sure I'm lined up at the bottom so my lines end up 90 degrees, and I'm going to draw the lightest possible mark to make that line. So just to show you the difference, I did a mark with the B pencil that I've been using for the outside, and even the lightest mark comes out super dark. So I want you to do a much lighter mark. Okay, so you're gonna do the first mark with your triangle going up like this, and then you flip it over and line it up with the line and finish your line going the rest of the way up. Then you're gonna do exactly the same thing on the sides. So you're gonna take your ruler, you're gonna line it up, make sure you're lined up perfectly with 0, and you're going to line up, and then you're gonna go 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, and then 12, and then you have to do 2 more marks because you're doing 15 inches going down. So I just do 1 more mark at 1.5. Do the same thing on the other side. Now going across, I should be able to reach with no problem. Now I'm just going to double check my marks on this side, and I'm going to line it all up. And then I've got 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, and then go down a little bit further and do my other mark. Now I've got to do these lines going across. So it's super important that you remember that these are 1.5 inch marks, not 1 inch marks like you're doing on your other one. Now I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to double check it a few times, make sure I'm lined up perfectly. Because if you don't, your face is going to be skewed when you transfer it. And then the lightest possible mark using my 4H, okay? And you're going to do that with the entire piece of paper. So I have the paper here for you, so you're going to have to come and pick it up at some point before class next week. And if you have any questions about any of this, you're going to contact me by email before Sunday, okay? So you have to do it by Saturday night at like 5. You have to contact me. So do not do anything else. Don't start the drawing because we're